Our topic is power for change, and I want to illustrate this with two quotes. So the first is about power, and I've got a definition of power here from Bertrand Russell, and he says power is the ability to produce intended effects. So any of us as leaders who want to make change happen, we need power. The second quote comes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and this is a quote about change. And he says, "Change does not roll in on the wheels of inevitability, but comes through continual struggle." So we as leaders can't expect change to just happen. We have to make an effort, often at great struggle and great cost. So let's think about this in a health and care context. A few years ago, I was involved in a review of people at work in the English National Health Service. And the feedback that we got more than any other was a sense of people saying, "I haven't got permission to make change happen." So whoever we talked to at the point of care, doctors, nurses, allied health professionals said, "I can make so many changes in my service or in my area, but I haven't got permission, I haven't got the power to make the change happen." So let's talk about power. I think this framework from Jeremy Hyman's and Henry Timms is very helpful for thinking about power at work. What they contrast is what they call old power and new power. Old power is like a currency, it's like money. Some people have got a lot of it and most people haven't. So it's formal authority in organisations and systems. And the people with this kind of power push it down. And they command people to do things. You have to do this because it's the quality standard. You have to do this because it's the incentive scheme. You have to do this because we have to hit our end of the year budget requirements. And the thing about old power is that it's closed. So if I'm a senior leader, say in a hospital system, and I work with leaders in the local community, I can't command them to do anything. Okay, my power ends at the door. And one thing we'd say about old power is that it's largely transactional. It's about structures and systems and processes and mechanisms for doing things. Let's contrast it with new power. New power is like a current, a source of energy. It's made by many people coming together with common purpose. And the more people that join in with our new power initiative or campaign or movement, then the more power we have. And with new power, we can pull it into our organisations and systems. It's shared, it's open. Anybody that shares our purpose and shares our value can be part of it. And a very key thing about new power is that it's based on relationships. People will engage in a new power way because they want to, whereas with old power, often we engage because we have to. It's part of our job, it's part of our role. So because new power is so relational, when we as leaders operate in new power ways, the ways that we relate to other people, the trust that we build is absolutely critical. Because if people don't trust us, they won't engage with us. Now, the kinds of organisation that many of us work in are ones where old power is highly dominant. And what I'd say as leaders is that we have to be able to operate in that quite tricky, zigzaggy place in the middle. We work in an old power system, we have old power authority, but it isn't enough. And when I think about those leaders that I admire the most in the health and care system, they're people who, yes, they have old power authority, but they operate essentially in new power, highly relational ways. And I think that's the way of the future. So, sometimes people say to me, "Well, Helen, I can't make a difference. I haven't got any power. I'm only a nurse or a doctor or a support worker. What difference can I make?" Well, actually, roles at the end of the day, aren't what determine how much power we have. This comes from some research that was carried out by some Canadian researchers, Battilana and Casciaro, and they went into 67 organisations in the English National Health Service to find out, when it comes to being a great change agent, someone that can make change happen, what are the characteristics or attributes that matter the most? And what they found was that those people who were central in the informal networks, that is, those people who operated in new power ways, had far more ability to make change happen than those people that were at the top of the formal hierarchy. So, what I'd say is that working in new power ways, even in an old power system, is a very effective way of making change happen. So when it comes to being able to make change happen, I'd say that change is inherently relational, and our ability to make change happen depends on our ability to work in new power ways, to connect with other people in the system. As individual leaders, we can make small things happen, but if we want to make big things happen, if we want to change a whole system, then we have to work with others to enable that. Here's some really interesting research. This comes from Nicola Burgess at Warwick Business School, and it's based on a number of NHS organisations that were undertaking whole system, very ambitious improvement projects. What the study showed is that there were very big differences in the outcomes achieved by the organisations taking part in this improvement initiative. All of these organisations got the same resource, all of them got the same levels of support, and yet some of them made huge differences and others didn't. So what Nicola Burgess did was to identify the factors that made the biggest difference in terms of the achievements that the participating organisations made. And what she found was that more than any other factor, the level of social connection in the organisation seemed to be what made the biggest difference. And I would agree with that. I would say that the spread of change happens more through relationships and the building of community, bringing people together with shared purpose, than any other factor. Let's look at the difference between a couple of organisations that she studied. This one here, Organisation A, its performance was outstanding. And what you can see here are the connections in this organisation. So high degree of connectivity, lots of people connected to each other, lots of interaction, people across this organisation talking to each other. And what you're also seeing is very high levels of collaboration, because you can see, dense clusters of people together. And what this shows us is a high degree of connectivity, which is associated with people being able to exchange knowledge, to learn and share. Let's contrast Organisation A with Organisation D. So again, looking at all those really tight connections in Organisation A, and here we have Organisation D, which ended up in what's called here special measures, which means that the leaders of this organisation were given extra support to help them with performance. And look at the difference here. What we're seeing is that 2/3 of this network is decentralised. Instead of lots of close connections, you're seeing chains. So this level of connectivity, which is low to moderate, also means a low to moderate connection in terms of knowledge sharing and learning together. A word that I would use in this context is agency. And agency means the power and ability to make choices and to act on them. So people with agency have the power to make a difference. And when I look back to my very long career as a change leader in health and care, what I see time and time again is that change efforts are far more likely to fail because of lack of agency, feeling the power to be able to make things happen, than because people aren't well trained, they don't have improvement skills, or because they don't have resources, or they don't have a good improvement methodology. And we can look at agency at multiple levels. I think it's very helpful to contrast what I'd call individual agency, which is about me, as an individual feeling that I've got the power and ability to make choices and act on them. When people feel individual agency, it's where they've got high organisational status, formal authority in an old power way, or with patients and service users, we'd be talking about situations of shared decision making and self-care that helps individuals feel, a higher level of power over their own health. What we should also be talking about is collective agency. And collective agency happens when people come together and take action together, united by a common purpose in a classic new power way. Harnessing the power of the group, of the community, and using influence that is built on the mutual trust that people have for each other. So how do we build agency? I want to suggest here 10 ways of doing this, and this can be about our own agency and also about how we as leaders support other people to build agency too. So let's go through the 10. Okay, number 1 is about creating small changes one step at a time. Very often we underestimate the power of small changes. A very small change, which may only impact, 1 or 2 service users or a couple of colleagues, it crosses a line between being an idea or a concept to something that is actionable and real. Number 2, emphasising progress. Studies have shown that where professionals feel that they've had a good day and they've made progress is their best day at work. So, supporting our teams to feel that sense of progress is really important. Number 3 is about reframing our thinking. So instead of thinking, that didn't work very well, that failed, let's flip it and say, that was really fantastic learning. Instead of having to be the kind of leader that, has to be in the know all the time when people come and ask us things, let's flip that and say, well, I don't really know the answer to that at the moment, but it's really interesting, let's find it out together. Okay. Number 4 and number 5 are actually connected. Number 4 is about finding our crew. Okay, finding the people that have got the same shared purpose and want the same things that we want. And number 5 is about getting social support. The number 1 rule that I'd say about being an effective change agent or leader of change is you can't be a great change agent on your own. However creative or passionate or determined we are, that there's something about organisations and at the tentacles of the way that you're meant to behave and status quo that get you in the end. So I think, our ability to find other people to connect with is really critical. Number 6 is about making change routine, and that's why I have so much respect for organisations that develop a system-wide improvement system. Organisations that take on improvement on a very big scale, create the conditions for everybody in the organisations to make change happen every day, and I think there's a real sense of agency there. Okay. Number 7, learn from the best. In an era of social media and Twitter and LinkedIn, we can reach out to almost anybody anywhere in the world and ask them to help us. The worst thing that could happen is that they ignore us or they say no. And much of the time, people say yes. We've got more power and more connection than we ever thought. Okay. Number 8 is to think story. When we tell stories about our own experiences, people hear our values and will connect with us. And storytelling, I think, is such a critical part of building collective agency. Okay. Number 9 is to build a spectrum of allies. Very often when it comes to change and improvement, we find the people that think the same as us, and we end up just staying in a small bubble of people, like an echo chamber. And actually what we need to be doing is finding the people actually who are opponents and helping to move them to become our allies. Number 10 is to persist. I was involved in a research study of successful clinical innovators, and 6 or 7 of them told me their stories. And the one constant in all those stories was about people who stood up against the status quo and saw this as a long game and persevered. So I really like this quote here from Gandhi, and he says, "First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win." What do I think about the leaders who will succeed in the future? I think they're the leaders who operate in both old power and new power ways, but particularly are able to use new power skills. So they operate with new power leadership skills in terms of building strong relationships and connection. And linked to that, okay, the thing that binds us is a sense of shared purpose and working through shared purpose. They're the kinds of leaders that support everybody in their teams, okay, everybody in their communities to build their agency. When it comes to information flows, they don't just work with top-down cascade, but they understand, who are the informal influencers, okay? What are the informal systems for information flow, and use those just as much as they use the formal ones. They're the leaders that design change in new power ways. Okay, in terms of seeking to get many, many people on board, using principles of co-production and collaboration. And they support individuals to build their change capacity. And that's about having improvement skills, but it's also about really supporting individuals to build their own agency. So to finish, I just wanted to give you a couple of quotes that inspire me. And the first one comes from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he's got a slightly different definition of power, which I think fits with this talk very well. He talks about power being the ability to achieve purpose. And he says, power properly understood is nothing but the ability to achieve purpose. It is the strength required to bring about social, political, and economic change. And he says, what is needed is a realisation that power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. And we might bristle at the use of the word love, so we can change that word. We can change it to shared purpose, or listening, or empathy, or care. But an understanding that if we've got power and it isn't built from a place of love or a place of shared purpose or a greater good, then nothing good will come of it. And if we have love, like we feel a sense of injustice really strongly, a sense that things have to change, but we don't actually take steps to build power, then it goes absolutely nowhere. And my very final quote, how I want to end this talk, is actually connected to this, and it comes from Peter Block. But before I do that, I just want to go back to this picture that I showed you at the beginning. Our health and care systems are full of people who have the potential to be amazing change agents and activists, forces for good. But so many of those people feel, I can't do this, I can't even make changes in my own service. I haven't got permission. I haven't got the power. Maybe what we have to do is what Peter Block says. Confronting people with their freedom, supporting people to build their own agency for improvement and change may be the ultimate act of love. Thank you.